together. Today is a beautiful day to gather together, and it is also a beautiful way to close out our Influencers series together. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been reflecting on those prophetic voices who have shaped our understanding of God's love and God's justice and God's call on our lives in our time. We've learned from people like James Cone and his call to liberation, from Rachel Held Evans and her faithful wrestling with faith, and from many others who've helped us expand our vision of what it means to follow in Christ's way of love. And today, instead of hearing one more influencer filtered through me, we have something way better than that. You're going to get to hear from 4 members of our community about voices that have shaped their faith. You'll hear their stories, their insights, and their wisdom that they've learned from influencers in their life. And I guarantee you'll leave here with new names to explore, some new books to read, new ways to think about your own journey and those who've influenced your life and what it means to follow in the way of Christ. And so I want to invite up to the stage for us today Oliver Johnson, Kate Boyd, Kenton Self, and Robin Russell, who are going to come share with us today on these stools here this morning. But as they're coming up, here's what I've been thinking and why we're doing this today. Because the most beautiful part of being in a faith community isn't that we all have the same influences or identical journeys. It's that we each bring our own stories, our own encounters with voices that have challenged or comforted or inspired and transformed us. And we gather today like this, like we do each Sunday, all of those influences converge in this space. And so the person sitting next to you has been shaped by different people, different experiences, different books than you have. And before you try to figure out what those are, it's not a problem to solve for the person next to you. Instead, it is a gift to celebrate together, because your journey influences mine. Your wrestling makes space for my questions. Your discoveries open up new possibilities for all of us. And God is at work anew in the beautiful convergence of all of our influences and all of our journeys. And so, Kenton and Kate and Robin and Oliver, welcome, and thank you for sharing with us today. Let's give them a hand. So I have invited them to reflect on and to share someone or someones who have influenced their faith journey. And so we'll just kind of go in order here. And so Kenton, tell us who you are, and tell us who your influencer is today.
So I am Kenton Self. I've been a member here at Arapahoe for, I think, 8 or 9 years. Cool. I'm a member of the Room 2 Sunday school class and a member of the choir. And my influencer that I wanted to talk about today is Rene Girard. Rene Girard was someone who influenced me because he helped me kind of work through the problem I was having with the violence that you have in the Bible. Rene Girard he's a scholar, he's an academic. So he didn't approach the question of violence in the Bible. He approached the question of how we have sacred violence just in all of our cultures. And so he starts with this idea that violence really is rooted in desire. And he has kind of 2 insights that are important if you want to know about Rene Girard. The first is that desires aren't something that are strictly internal for us. Desires are something that are copied, they're imitated. So kind of the classic example is you put 2 kids in a room full of toys, they desire whatever toy the other one has, and that kind of desire spreads around. Yeah, right, that's true. And if you've got an adult in the room that can kind of cap it, so that desire doesn't become rivalry, doesn't become violence, then you've kind of controlled the situation. But what happens when you scale that up? What happens when this goes to a whole community and there's not really the adult in the room to kind of tap it down? How does the community not just completely self-destruct and destroy each other? And this is Girard's second insight, which is called the scapegoat mechanism. What happens in these situations is somebody will point to a victim and say, they're the problem. They're the reason we're kind of having this crisis. And because everybody's copying each other, that once that first finger is pointed, then the second finger is pointed, and so on and so forth. And eventually, that scapegoat, that victim, becomes either executed or expelled. Think about the Salem witch trials. You can think about deport them now. That's all kind of that same situation that we have there. And once that's done, once they've burned the witch, then there's this kind of peace that comes over the community. Everybody was at each other's throats one second, and then the next second, they're getting along. That peace could almost be described as righteous. There's a camaraderie that's divine. You could even say God was on the side of the mob. God was against the victim. And yeah, so the other thing to think about this is all kind of hidden from sight. You're not realizing that you're doing this, but this is how we have this origin of the concept of sacred violence. I mentioned Girard was an academic. He develops this through a study of literature and mythology, and then he reads the Bible, and he says, the Bible, it's taking that blinder that's on your eyes that you can't see what you're doing, and it's starting to slowly unmask it over the progression of the Bible. And we see that God isn't on the side of the mob. God's on the side of the victims. And there's a lot we could talk about, but I'm limited by time. But I'll just say, ultimately, God is revealed in the person of Jesus. And like every story about Jesus in the Bible is about Jesus standing with the victim, standing with the marginalized. So if you want to align yourself with what God's doing, then align yourself with those on the margins, with those on the outsides. And so, yeah, it helped give me basically a new appreciation for the scriptures, a new way of kind of understanding it, and so yeah, that's why.
Wow.
He's been somebody that I've kind of kept as an influencer.
Thank you, Kenton. That's kind of blowing my mind right now. But yeah, unfortunately, as you mentioned, just incredibly poignant for today. And for these cycles that we continue to repeat. And God is the one who caps, but also takes the side of the marginalized, helps us transform that, and maybe be transformed so that those cycles can be broken and be peace. Thank you for that work. Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you to Renee Girard for influencing you. Cool. Okay, Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate Boyd. I've been a member here 3 years, something like that. And I'm part of the Renew Sunday School class. And and as a person who is a writer who sits at the intersection of scripture and spiritual formation and community and culture, somebody who has influenced me a lot is C.S. Lewis. And it's actually been kind of a through line throughout my life. C.S. Lewis has given me something different at a lot of different junctions in my life. Sorry, I have notes, because like I said, I'm a writer, not a speaker, so it helps if I have, in case I lose my way. So when I was young, I think I really got to witness virtues embodied in something like the Chronicles of Narnia with, Lucy and her compassion, or Reepicheep and his courage. And to get an idea of sort of the vastness of God and the actions that God will take, whether, the lengths that he'll go to be with us or be close to us, or even just language around God being good but not tame, I think is a famous line, and I really love that one. When I was a little bit older, I really learned how to think about my faith and process my faith more rationally, I think, too. So developing language and pulling from different philosophical constructs, or, language even, using language to think about it. So more like his apologetic work, like Mere Christianity, The Four Loves, things like that, where he really thought through some of those things, helped me to learn how to do that myself, whether that was to think through it or to write about it. And later in my life, more recently, I've really learned more from him on like how to process emotion, like he did in A Grief Observed, or really just to even think about his career more generally, to read more widely and realize that you can find wisdom in fiction as much as nonfiction. You can learn about the Bible because you learn mythology. And really learning how to pull all the threads of my influences together to make sense of things, to find my own faith along the way, and to learn to practice kind of my sacred imagination and like put stories and thoughts and frameworks from all different kinds of places into one. So something like The Great Divorce or Screwtape Letters are books that in which he really plays with. He uses the idea of fiction, but pulls together the threads of his influences in reflective and formational ways. And so, yeah, in that way, he's kind of like meant something different to me throughout my entire journey, but has helped me become sort of the person that I am today in the way that I practice my faith.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate that. And so if all you've ever read of C.S. Lewis is Chronicles of Narnia, check out some of C.S. Lewis's theological works. And if all you've ever read are the theological works, read Chronicles of Narnia as well to find that. Yeah, just an amazing influence. And it's wonderful to hear how that shapes you now as a writer. You can find Kate's writing out there in the world as well as on Substack if you're looking for a modern influence among us as well too. Thanks, Kate. Robin?
Hi there, I'm Robin Russell. I've been here about 1.5 years, and I'm a spiritual director and also a hospice chaplain, and my husband, Art, is up in the choir. We're very glad to be here. I'm also a writer, so I have a lot of influences in my life. This has been a tough thing to narrow down, but I just thought in the last 6 months, say, one person that I've quoted most often in my roles has been Kate Bowler. She's a professor of religious history at Duke University and a podcaster and an author. One of my favorite books is Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. So she also has a wicked sense of humor, which I kind of like. She says she's Methodist at Duke and Mennonite when she goes back home to Manitoba. So she specializes in the prosperity gospel that's so frequent in our culture today, and she calls out the stories we tell ourselves about suffering and happiness and bad times and success. It infects all of us. We think if I just do the right things, my life is going to stay on track and be without any struggles. Kate knows that things don't always happen for a reason. She was diagnosed 10 years ago with a metastatic colon cancer that she had to have colon surgery and chemo and experimental immunotherapy for. She's now in remission and has regular scans to monitor her condition. But she knows how to balance a realistic hope while knowing how fragile things can be. And I can relate to that because I also have an incurable but treatable cancer. I have lymphoma. And 9 years ago, I had regular infusions. Now, thanks to some amazing meds, yay, cancer research, I'll take these meds for the rest of my life, but my doctor says I will die with it, not from it. So, thank you. So Kate encourages me to keep it real and to be fully present with my patients, for whom a happy ending means a good death. She doesn't speak in Christian platitudes. She can sit with suffering without having to figure it all out, and she doesn't skip to the happy ending. She knows how to lament. I like that she's a generation younger than me, and I can still learn from her. And I like that when I listen to her podcast, Everything Happens, I also learn from interesting people she interviews, like theologian N.T. Wright or Irish poet Pádraig Tuama, which is just fun to say, right? Kate likes to say life is both beautiful and terrible, and we need to be honest about every bit of it. So instead of trying to live our best Instagram lives, maybe we need to live our okayest lives. And what does that look like? It's knowing we are doing the best we can. And life is sometimes really hard, especially now, right? We all suffered moral injury, secondhand trauma, watching our deepest ethical beliefs being destroyed in front of us. So living okayist is finding a balance between trying to control or fix everything or curl up in despair. I'm helped by this quote of hers. It's an easy lie that has wormed its way into my mind that I am the center that must hold. Right? Instead, she says, know what is mine to do and what needs to be released into God's care, and sometimes take a good long nap. Pace yourselves for the long haul. Kate Bowler helps me stay sane when the world seems upside down.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robin. I got a chance to visit with Robin a little bit before today, and was talking with you as I went for a walk about Kate Bowler, and it ended up being a very long conversation because I had a lot of questions that I was asking you of, okay, help me process through this, because her influence is especially important and helpful for us today, and so thank you for sharing that, Robin. Appreciate it. Oliver?
Good morning. I'm Oliver Johnson, and I've been hanging out here for almost 3 years, I believe it is, and have managed to get myself into a number of different things with the help of Pastor Kathy and a few others here at Arapahoe. When I first received the assignment, I immediately thought of my parents, so Oliver Jordan Johnson Jr. and my mother, Frances Janice Polk Johnson. And then after I sat with it for a while, I said, well, really, their influence is rooted in and flows from the legacy of my great-great-grandparents. And I have notes, but I also have a slide. I'm going to try to work from the slide, yeah. So my great-great-grandparents, Spencer Thomas Johnson, and my great-great-grandmother, Carolyn Olivia Kate Alley Johnson. My great-great-grandmother was born on a farm in Fayette County, Tennessee, on the farm of a gentleman by the name of Henry Alley, who was her father and was also a slave owner, enslaved her, and her mother, Edna, who was my great-great-great-grandmother. At some point during her life, her childhood, we believe she was taught to read and write, which we know at that time was punishable by death, but that was a great gift to her. She went on to teach, after she and my great-great-grandfather were married, she taught him to read and write, and she was the first person of color to teach in the Fayette County school system in 1866. She went on to become the secretary to the first bishop of the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, CME, which later became the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I guess the CME was formed initially as a result of the races not mixing on Sunday morning. So there you have it. Spencer spearheaded the establishment of the Menances School in 1899, sought assistance from the Rosewald Fund, which was established by a gentleman by the name of Julius Rosewald, and he and Booker T. Washington partnered together to open and establish a number of Rosenwald schools throughout the U.S. The Menances School sought assistance, financial assistance from the Rosenwald Fund in the early 1920s, and then the school became the first four-year accredited high school for African Americans in Shelby County, and also at that time the largest Rosenwald school in the U.S. So my great-great-grandparents took their talents and used those talents in service to others. Their immediate community, whether we're talking about education, but also in their faith community with the the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church. The next slide captures what I think really speaks to their life, and that's Philippians 2 and 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your interests, but each of you to the interest of others.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Oliver. And I can see that, how that gets lived out in your way, the way that you've been used, who you are as a part of serving in many ways that Pastor Kathy gets you wrangled into here in this church, as well as taking this legacy and sharing it with us. And so thank you for that. And so we've heard a diversity of influences this morning already, from theologians to writers of fiction even, imagine, to modern thinkers who are helping us process in the world, to people in our own lives, legacies within our family who have influenced and shaped us. And so this is just scratching the surface of the breadth of influences that are out there in your life and in my life, that shape us and form us and that speak to us even today. And so I asked each of our friends here today to also consider this question, not just who have their influencers been, but what do you think those influencers would say to us as Arapaho today? And so what message do they have for us in our time? And so, Kenton, you want to start?
Yeah. I think what Rene Girard would say, first of all, is that we have stood in solidarity with those on the marginalized. I think he would recognize that as a virtue, as a holy virtue for us. And then I think that another thing that he would say, because a lot of this comes from who you model your desires after, I think he would say be conscious of who you model your desires after. And we've had a great series talking about Dorothy Day and Rachel Held Evans and grandparents. Man, if I think about the role my grandmother played in my life, Clive Staple Lewis and Kate Bowler as well, I think he would say, keep that in mind, because ultimately who we want to imitate is we want to imitate Jesus. And Jesus even says he's imitating the Father. So keep that, be conscious of that line of influence in your life. And so, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. I was wondering who Clive Staple Lewis is, and it took me a moment to realize, oh yeah, that's C.S. Lewis. Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, when you sent us that question, I think it's hard to sort of like look at the conflict in the world and not think about like World War II, in the sense of like that's when C.S. Lewis was doing a lot of work, was even commissioned by his government to do some work. And it just kind of reminded me of how he used what he had and what he was gifted in for the cause, but without letting go of his community or his imagination or his joy. And that maybe those are the things, the keys to making it through a life and a world full of conflict and evil. And so yeah, I think it would be something like that, like finding what helps you stay tethered to hope so that you can keep resisting the forces of destruction and hopelessness in the world through your joy, and then practicing your holy imagination for what does it look like to use what you have on behalf of other people in that same way.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, poignant. Robin?
I think Kate would say to just remember that the pain we're feeling is a reminder that we are sane, that we're not living in delusion, and that some of the things that are being revealed should be revealed. We need to see that there's injustice. We need to see cruelty. We need to see how much the world needs us, all right? And it reminds us to double down on the things that matter, on being good and loving and standing for truth and respecting the dignity of each and every human being. I think specifically she'd encourage us to do 3 things. That sounds like a sermon, right?
Preach.
Create practices that restore your peace and help bring your neurological systems down, whether that's meditation, whether that's stopping doom scrolling or reducing it. Number 2, ask God to help us to hold the beautiful and the terrible in their right sizes. Not so that the terrible is so enormous we're overwhelmed, or that we miss it and we end up crying in the Kroger parking lot. We don't know why. Just right size those things for us so that we can carry them. And remember, there's still beauty in the midst of it. And finally, pray for a wider patience for the fact that things come and go. And to remember to have a little more hope when things are terrible. This isn't going to last forever. And a little more humility when things are good. So to hold both of those loosely, knowing that we are held.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Oliver?
I think my great-great-grandparents would say, no matter how your life begins and what your life circumstances are, that we can all be of service to the church, to the community. When we think that our lives don't minister to others, we'll be surprised when we can be surprised when people come to us and say, I noticed how you did this, or that act of kindness really made a difference in my life. So it's not these grand or big things that always can make a big difference, but sometimes it's the small things. And I think we have to remember that there's a light within each of us, and God can use each one of us.
Wonderful. Yeah, well said. Friends, thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Give each other. Y'all are off the hot seat. You can grab your seat. Thank you so much. What an incredible gift we have received today from these friends as they've shared their influences and those who've been gifts to them in their life, in this witness, in the big ways, in the small ways of the way that God works in our lives. Your wisdom that you've shared has enriched us all today. Thank you so much. So as I listened to Kenton and Kate and Oliver and Robin, I was struck by something, that each person that they shared took the wisdom that they'd learned and used it to point beyond themselves to something greater, to a way that witness could make a difference in the world. And the way that each one of the people up here on the stools also reflected those things that they've been shaped by. Those things that they were equipped by equipped them to change the world and to be a change. And that brings us to the heart of why we've spent these past weeks exploring our influencers. We're not just meant to be influenced. We're called to be influencers ourselves. Not just on Instagram, though if you've got that platform, use it for good, right? But to be that kind that Kate Bowler or C.S. Lewis was, that kind that takes what they've received and pays it forward and uses it to speak into the world that they had around them, the kind that lets their real lives become wisdom, an answer to someone else's question, the kind of influencers that our panels are and that you are in our community around us. Each of us in our lives have influence, and we have a calling that goes along with it, the calling of letting our lives point others toward God's love, toward God's hope, toward God's justice, toward courage. Maybe you influence through the books you recommend to others, or the conversations you have over coffee, or the way that you treat the person bagging your groceries. Maybe it's through your writing or your art or your presence in board meetings where equity hangs in the balance. Maybe it's simply through showing up authentically in a world that often rewards pretending. And here at Arapahoe, we're called to do that together. We're called to be a creative, constructive, forward-leaning Christian community, opening the door wide for all to experience the healing and reconciling love of God. We're called to be an influence in our world. And that influence doesn't happen automatically. It happens through each of us, choosing to be influenced by voices of love and justice, and then choosing to become that for others. The beautiful truth of this is that somewhere, someone is watching you right now, being influenced by you, how you wrestle freely with your faith, how you choose love over fear, how you stand with the marginalized, how you rebuild and reconstruct after deconstruction. Someone needs the influence that you have to offer. Someone needs your story, your questions, your discoveries, your journey. And so, friends, be grateful for the influences in your lives. Read widely, listen deeply, and with humility, let yourself be changed by the voices that you hear that lead you further toward wisdom, toward justice, and toward love. And then with the same courage and grace that you've received, go be the influence that someone else needs. Go be the voice that points others toward the wide table of God's love. Because that's how transformation spreads. That's how the kingdom comes. And that's how love wins. And through grace, that's how God uses us to change the world. And so we say, thanks be to God, who speaks through influencers, big and small, wide and far, the God who speaks to us in so many ways. May it be so among us. May we be influenced, and may we be influencers. May we be loved, and may we love as we've been loved. Thanks be to God. Amen.